Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Brian Foster on Kardak Radio, presenting the program Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us. Hello, this is Brian Foster, and today we're talking about our program, The Seeds of Astrology, the Spirit World with Brian Foster. So I'd like to start off a bit, take the first 10-15 minutes talking about the subject, and then I will take your calls. So how did I first read about astrology and reading about different spiritist literature? So in this book called Beyond the Veil by the Reverend G. Val Owen, a spirit who gave his name as Astriel, talked about the influence of the spheres. And this is what he said. He says, "Yes, friend, there is, after all, something in the astrological idea, and perhaps your scientists do well to give it a wide berth, for it may not be much understood by, and would probably be fraught with danger too, such as they who do not understand that spiritual power is spiritual power. It is real and tremendous, and every sphere of all these is reinforced or modified by others. The study of these things should be approached with the utmost reverence and prayer. And for these are the realms where the angels of high estate go softly, and we of lesser estate look on and wonder after the sublimity of that being who unifies all this in himself, and who has no name, so that can be transmitted to us who can only reach out after him a little way and see our arm is shortened." So there's a couple concepts in that paragraph above which must be explained in order to comprehend Astriel's meaning. Even after one is introduced to the concept of overlapping and intersecting spiritual power, Astriel let us know that understanding the state of God, the being who unifies, lies beyond our, and to a lesser extent, his reach. Nevertheless, to even begin to envision what Astriel reveals about the influence of spiritual fields upon our life should allow us to place our lives in different contexts. We are not just on earth to be conceived, raised, and tossed out into the working world without a purpose. Not the dreams of our parents, not the desires of our extended families, nor our own chaotic choices that we have made in our early years are the primary drivers of our destiny. We are placed individually for a specific purpose, and we are pushed ahead collectively for a targeted destination. And the position of the planets, stars, and galaxies do have an effect. So let's talk about astrology just for a couple moments. So astrology has its fans and detractors. To its opponents, it's a scam, right? And most have heard about the college study where each student was asked to supply their personal information so a complete astrological profile could be written. The next week, the professor handed out the results, handed each student their own customized, this is what he said, their own customized report. And the students were amazed at how accurate they were. Many were convinced that somehow their personal feelings and milestones in their life were correctly interpreted by reading the stars, until the professor asked each student to pass their profile to the student in front of them. Then all the students had a revelation. All the profiles were the same, but it was written generally enough to elicit, generally enough, but with hints of specificity that each student at first believed was meant entirely for them. Granted, fooling college freshmen isn't a difficult task, but the story gets at the crux of what detractors despise about astrology, generalities that could mean nothing and something depending on each individual interpretation. To the non-believers, astrology is a worthless diversion of empty heads. The accessibility of astrological advice in newspapers and magazines for the general public reinforces their opinion on a daily basis. On the other hand, there are personal stories of charts and forewarnings of great accuracy. In fact, I'll relate one told to me by a friend. He's from India. It is customary for his family at the birth of a child to have an entire life chart created. At his birth, the chart was completed. As a typical boy, he had no interest in it. As he grew older, he never gave it a second thought. When he was married, his mother gave it to his wife. His wife read the entire tome and was astounded. It correctly foretold the year in which he broke his arm as a child. It even properly foretold the very arm that was broken, plus the year of his marriage, and the other factors were uncannily accurate. He even foretold the year and manner of his death, but his wife would not let him see this part. So how does one reconcile these two extremes? Well, I suggest we think of astrology the same way we think about near-death experiences. For many years, they were dismissed as hallucination caused by temporary lack of oxygen in the brain or some other medical cause. But given recent research that has eliminated each theory, where they've proven that even after brain death, people still have near-death experiences. So hence, while there certainly exists many who dabble in talking to spirits as a con game also, in a way to make a living, there's also legitimate people that have NDEs and mediums who communicate with spirits, high spirits, low spirits, whatever type of spirits. So there is reality, and then sometimes I'm sure there are some falseness to some of these people. So let's go on about what was told by Astral to the Reverend G. Val Owen in his book, Life Beyond the Veil. So what he said is when he said the powers which watch over the world, this is his quote, "We did not, of course, mean to localize these powers on one side of the planet, but to imply that all enveloping watch which the heavenly powers keep about the sphere which is called Earth. These powers are residents in the zones of which the Earth itself is the center, and they lie in concentric circles around it. The inferior zones are those near the planet's surface, in progress in power and glory as the distance is increased." So think of a ball, right? And then more balls around and round and round it, growing bigger and bigger. Because heaven isn't just one enormous location. Just like Jesus said, my mansion has many rooms. The heaven is a series of spheres. Each sphere is higher and higher as you go in the hierarchy of Spiritism. Like the Russian doll, whereby the larger doll holds all the others. So, and then as you're in each sphere, this is what Astral tells us. For instance, when I'm in the 10th of these zones, with the 10th sphere, my cognizance is limited more or less by that 10th zone as to its outer or superior boundary. I may, on occasion and by permission, visit the 11th zone or go even higher, but residence in those higher zones is not permitted to me. On the other hand, the zones inferior to the 10th are not impossible for me, for the zone in which I dwell, being a sphere, includes within itself, even geometrically considered, all 9 inferior spheres. So what he's saying is that as the level you are, you can be at that level, and you can influence all levels below you, or you can travel to those levels. So in essence, when we in our physical bodies were on the surface of the Earth, we are watched over by the higher spheres above us. Now, think of the larger picture. Imagine the Earth circling the sun, with spiritual spheres accompanying the Earth. So think of this ball bigger than the Earth rotating the sun. Now, simultaneously, think of the other planets in our solar system also rotating with much larger footprints. So they too have concentric circles around them, or concentric spheres, I should say. Add the spheres that surround our solar system, and then think about the ones that evolve other solar systems that are around the hubs of our galaxy. And you begin to get an idea of the intersecting circles on a colossal basis. Astra tells us in his own words, "But as you progress outward, you come into a more complicated state of affairs. For not the Earth only, but every planet in the solar system has its zones, our spiritual zones. So as you go further and further from Earth, you come to a realm where the spheres of Earth and the nearest planet interweave with each other. And as every planet is served with like attendants, so the complication is multiplied. And you will begin to see that the study of spheres is not so simple, as good many people among you, you evidently think it to be. And you demand from us this information as to the meaning of this thing. Draw a diagram of the solar system with the sun at the center and the planets roughly in their respective places around him. Then begin with the Earth and encircle him with, say, 100 circles. Do the same with Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the others, and treat the sun in a like manner. And you will have a faint idea of our work and its absorbing interest, but profound depths of meaning, who include in our studies of the spheres of God." So this is what Astral said. So, and what applies to our solar system applies to all the rest. And then it even comes from nebulae, right? So there are spiritual influence of other planet spheres that also affect us. So as the two spheres of spiritual power come into contact with each other, they cannot fail to act and counteract on each other. And this is what's happening to Earth. So hence, the very fact that the Earth comes into contact with spiritual spheres of other planets means that in some manner we are affected by that influence. Just as gravity continually modifies the rotation of the Earth around the Sun, we too are exposed to spiritual power which could alter our own personal trajectories. So here's an example of this. In the book, Genesis, Miracles, and Predictions According to Spiritism, assembled and partially written by Allan Kardec with experts of communications from spirits. Here's the communication spirit Arago telling us how the human race progresses by revolution upheavals that may span centuries, thus unseen by individuals, but are nevertheless driven, wholly or partially, by planetary spiritual influences. This is what he says. Within a particular planetary system, all the bodies comprising it react upon one another. All physical influences are in solidarity, and there is not one of the effects that you designate as great disturbances that is not a consequence of the entire combination of influences within the system. I will state further that planetary systems react upon one another due to the nearness or distance that results from their orbital movement through the myriads of systems that compose our nebula. I'll even go further and state that our nebula, which is like an archipelago in the immensity of space, with its orbital movements through the myriads of nebulae, is subject to the influence of those it nears. Hence, nebulae react upon nebulae, and systems react upon systems, just as planets react upon planets. And the elements of each planet react upon another, and thus successively down to the atom. Hence, on each world, there are local or widespread revolutions that do not appear to be disturbances because the brevity of life allows only for the perception of partial effects. So Arago describes how the spiritual waves create uneasiness. And this is kind of what he says. He says, unconscious at first, this turmoil, which is nothing more than a vague desire, an indefinable yearning for something better, a need for change, is expressed through silent agitation and then through actions that prepare social revolutions, which, believe it or not, also have their own lifespan, similar to physical revolutions. Because everything is connected. If the spirit sight were not limited by the veil of matter, you would see these fluidic currents, which like thousands of conductor wires, line up through the spirit world and the physical world. So take, for instance, let's say the French Revolution. Could this have been a combination of planets and nebulae in our solar system, making people feel uncomfortable, right? And creating a revolution. And then you had the American Revolution right after that. So unbeknownst to billions of people on Earth, there are invisible forces entering our consciousness, which causes a great many to rethink previous positions, to no longer accept what has been tolerated for decades, but to strive for something new, and the alignment and proximity of planets and solar systems have a hand in the gradual movement of a culture to a new aspiration. Like the course change of an immense tanker, which slowly veers to a new direction. The hand of spiritual force guides us onto an alternate path. As with everything else on our planet and the universe, everything's in motion, right? A star or planet doesn't just hover over us. Everything there's always a complex mix and type of influences continuously imperceptibly shifting and modifying the thought waves entering our brain. Then Astro explains the effect of this process. Still concerning the solar system, we say that on considering what we have already said, you will see that we have not yet mentioned the complications which enter into the study of these spheres. For not alone do the concentric circles or zones about all the planets and the sun commingle with all the rest, but also the relative combinations is continually changing with the changing positions of these bodies and their consequent proximity to or distance from one another. So, all this different combination, the complexity of calculating the dominant influence of any one planet or star upon an individual, and the ability to precisely chart the effects of planets upon our future, I believe is beyond our current capability. While astrology may have correctly guessed at the effect of a planet, the actual spiritual radiation bombarding us are much more complex nature. So on a broader basis, I venture that astrology can predict the future like the weather stations of 70, 100 years ago could. Sometimes they were partially accurate, other times not even the ballpark. And only with the advent of supercomputers and much more modeling in modeling thousands and thousands of factors is the weather forecasting become more reliable. So what do I think at the end of the day? I think that, yes, I think we are influenced by planetary and larger systemic celestial positions. And I'm not convinced how astrological charts can correctly map personal destinies. What I surmise is that particular astrologers who are sensitive to the celestial positions, they also intuitively read and interpret planetary data correctly. They're like intuitive mediums. So when it comes to individuals, or possibly even entire nations coming to their destinies. So therefore, I believe that some astrologers have a gift of reading the planets and also getting information from the spirit world. So now I'll take calls for any questions that anyone may have. Let me put on the first caller. Hello, this is Brian Foster. Who's speaking?
Hi.
Hello.
This is Anne.
Oh, hello, Anne. What do you think?
Can you look at my chart?
So I am not an astrologist. So I do not look at charts, but what I do, I am a spiritist, and I do believe that there are some astrologists out there that can kind of read your chart and understand kind of the influences that may be affecting you. But I believe a lot of that is probably not accurate, considering down to the level. I think a lot of good astrologers are helped by the spirit world around them. I think that they are intuitive mediums that intuitively understand where the planets are, and they also are helped by other spirits as far as telling you what you need to know. And so we usually now when spirits help, let's say they help an astrologer, because think for a second, the type of person, it attracts the type of spirits that they are. So a very devout, good person with good intentions will attract very nice and good type spirits. Therefore, that person will have a more of an eye, probably because the higher spirits can see your future from a longer distance. They can see further in the future, whereas a lower spirit can only see a short time into your future. So therefore, I would say, and then also high spirits will tell you things that you need to do on a spiritual basis. They won't tell you the exact future, unless, of course, it's something important for your spiritual health. Because the spirit world really doesn't want us to know our future. They want us to grow, because our future is mostly determined, right? Because according to Spiritism, you are on Earth to learn, right? We are on this planet of atonement, meaning that we are here on Earth to go through trials that are preset for us, and that you actually, before you were born into your physical body, were made and helped them devise these trials for you to pay for your past debts or to learn new experiences.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm not sure, but I think that we create our future, but I'm not sure if the future is already predestined, or so. I don't really know if that is true for right now.
Well, I used to believe exactly like you did. And on my previous radio show, I talked about why I became a spiritist, and I can totally see your point. because it doesn't make sense, does it? Because we live in this chaotic world with all these happenstance things around us, and it seems too chaotic to have a predetermined future. But when I
does the Bible actually talk about predestined, like, life?
It does in certain passages, and then even Paul said it. He was selected for his life before he was born.
Okay. But it doesn't mean that he's, well, I understand. I'm not saying that I don't believe it or, I'm just at a place where I'm learning what's going on,
Absolutely. I totally understand.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the reason I believe in predestination is because my wife had an NDE years, 10, 14 years before we were married. And then she told me things that would happen in the future, and they happened. And these were like immensely detailed, and they happened. So during 2008, during the Great Recession, she told me this is a year before it happened that the bank I worked for would go broke, but don't worry, I'd be hired by the same bank but with a different name. And I didn't believe it at that time. I said that's ridiculous. That's horse. That's that's impossible. And she told me other things that came true, but to me they were general. You could say, yeah. I believe her. Absolutely, I do. Because I was so certain she was wrong, I actually bought more stock in the bank because I thought I'd make a bundle. And, of course, you know what happened. The bank went broke, but then they hired me later. And she was... So how can that happen? How can that happen when she was told that, 20 years before that is a specific, event.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible, but not probable.
Well, what about people and when they die? Don't you think, like, sometimes when they make the right choices, their life gets extended?
Yes. So there are. I totally agree. There are variabilities in the predestination, and you can and it all depends on the choices you make. So I totally agree. If you make good choices throughout your life and you help people, I mean, you're on Earth, and I believe most of the trials you go through are predestined. And really what you need to do on Earth is you need to keep a good attitude, keep helping people, keep loving people, and then that is your triumph through any trial you have. And then, yes, if you do these type of things, your life, if something is important to you that you want to be done, yes, it will be extended, I believe.
So when a doctor says, like, oh, you only have, like, 2 months to live, doesn't really have to be true.
Doesn't have to be true. It may be true. It may be something that you had agreed before you were born, that you would die of a certain disease at a certain age. There's in one of the books by Andre Luis, he is a spirit that wrote a series of 13, 14 books to the medium Chico Xavier, and he talked about as in the future life planning. They were going through a future life, let's say for a man, and the guy was showing them the plan for the guy's life, and he pointed out something right in his stomach. He said, "You see this? This is going to be an ulcer this guy's going to have when he's about 45, and he's going to have that ulcer because he stabbed somebody in a previous life."
Okay. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. I'll put you on hold, and I'll take another caller. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, this is Brian. Who's calling? Oh. They dropped. I'm sorry, that person dropped. So let me talk about more as far as I was talking to Ann. is, and also in the same vein with astrology, is what are we, why are we here, right? So if there are events that influence where we're at, influence the world in general, influence the human race, why are we influenced? So what is the earth all about? Why are we here? So what Spiritism tells us is that we as spirits, we start out as a primitive spirit, right? We start out as an ignorant, just like a child, right? Doesn't know right and wrong or anything. So when we start out on a primitive planet. So a primitive world is just like what it sounds like, right? So think of being in the Amazon or New Guinea amongst cannibals, right? So where it's according, Allan Kardec explains it in his book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, it's on the least evolved worlds. The beings that inhabit them are, to a certain extent, rudimentary. They have the human form, but are devoid of any beauty. Their instincts are not tempered by sentiment, our refinement, or benevolence, or by any notions of right and wrong. Brute force is the only law. They have no industry or inventions. They spend life in the conquest of food. So we've all started there. We've all been primitive spirits. But then eventually you graduate. The Earth, the next level of planet, is the world of trial and expiation, with also some place people call atonement. So that's where we are now. We're on the planet of atonement. You're living on this world. There's more evil presence than good. And now you know why life's not easy, because it's not supposed to be easy. You're supposed to be learning. You're supposed to be learning about why to be good. Why should you have love and kindness in your heart? Okay, I have another caller. Let me bring that person on. Hello, this is Brian. Who's calling?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yes, hi. I was just listening to the show.
Yes, how can I help you?
I was just listening in.
Oh, okay. I thought you were calling. Okay. I will go back where I was talking. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
What are the type of spirits who are residing on Earth? So, this is why there's such a panoply of different types of people living on Earth. This is why there's chaos here. So there's spirits from primitive worlds. They're on Earth for an education and a chance to develop themselves through contact with more advanced spirits. There are semi-civilized spirits that are indigenous to Earth, who have evolved little by little through long centennial periods. And then there are spirits undergoing trials from other planets. These spirits have already lived on other worlds from which they were banished because they persisted in evil, because they were a cause of disturbance to the good inhabitants. They have been regulated to living for a time among less advanced spirits, which is us. This is what we have to think of ourselves. We are like school children on a planet watched by our spirit guardians and guided in more ways than you think, guided in our day-to-day life. So these advanced spirits, since they carry with them their own, a bit more developed intelligence and the seed of acquired knowledge, they have a mission of helping us to advance. This is why the punny spirits are found in the midst of the most intelligent people, and they also have more sensibility to the miseries of life and are bitter to them because the sufferings bruise them more deeply than they bruise the primitive people, whose moral sense is more obtuse. This is what Allan Kardec said. So a lot of what I've heard and read is that a lot of these spirits that were more advanced and came from more advanced planets, but were sent here because they could not conform, to the good and stay to the light. A lot of these people come here and they are internally, subconsciously just revolted by the chaos and the misery that lives on this planet. And that's why I think when I've heard a lot of people get into alcohol and drugs because they cannot handle the life they're given here on Earth. It's just too different for them. So why are we here? So why am I talking about Spiritism? Does everybody need, are we here just to help ourselves? No, we're here to help the whole planet advance. We're here to help everybody do better and better as we go on. And this is, And so this is why the Earth is moving from a planet of atonement to a regenerative planet. And that regenerative planet, what is that like? So in the Spirit book, it says this: in the worlds of higher degree than our Earth, wars are unknown because no one thinks of doing harm to his fellow beings. And there is consequently no motive for hatred or discord. The foresight of their future, which is intuitive to the peoples of these worlds, and the sense of security resulting from a conscious void of remorse, cause them to look forward to death without fear, and of being simply a process of transformation, the approach of which they perceive without the slightest uneasiness. So in a regenerative world is one where spirits prepare themselves for transition from a planet of tests and atonements, which is our Earth, to even higher worlds of spiritual purity. There's still evil present to remind us of our past follies, but at least our planet is on an upward trend. In our new regenerative world, we still have trials, but to help us learn and grow. But it's not. We don't have to atone for past mistakes. So this is where we're going. And in Spiritism, a lot of it say we are on that path to become a planet of atonement. We are getting to the point where there are more and more good spirits being born, being regenerated, right, incarnated on Earth. And then as we get to the certain level of more good spirits on Earth, the society will change, right? Society will change, and as like the group effect will happen, is more and more people will know that it's better to be good and kind and loving to each other than to take and be envious and malicious gossip, all those behaviors that we really shouldn't have, right? We should try to take those blemishes out, because we are on this planet of atonement to do precisely that. That is to rid ourselves of negative behavior. So there's even planets above a regenerative planet, which is it's called a happy world. So in a happy world, we still retain our human form, although our senses are more acute. The body changes, as described in the Gospel according to Spiritism. The specific lightness of the body enables rapid and easy locomotion instead of dragging itself laboriously over the ground. It glides, so to speak, over the surface or sails through the air with no other effort than that of the will, in the way in which angels are portrayed. So you hear this gliding. You even hear about this when Andre Louise talks about in the book, He Goes to Heaven in No Solar, which is also a movie, by the way. I recommend it highly. Is that spirits go, they can walk just like we do, but they can also go by the speed of thought, right? So there is no limit. There's no on Earth, in our material world, light, the speed of light is the speed limit, right? But on the spirit world, there is no speed limit. You go as fast as you think. You want to go to another galaxy, you're there almost instantaneously. You want to go from Paris to New Delhi, you're there almost instantaneously. The speed limit, it's your mind that governs where you want to go. And then even as you incarnate, as you go in higher worlds, you have more aspects of being a dematerialized or less material spirit. So we as a human race, we will evolve into that. And politically on such worlds, these happy worlds, relationships between nations are always friendly and are never disturbed by the ambition of dominating their neighbor by war, which is its consequence. There are no masters, slaves, or privileges of birth. Only moral, intellectual ascendancy establish a difference of conditions and confer supremacy. Authority is always respected, for it is conferred only on those who have merit, and it's always exercised with justice. So again, we see this even in the Spiritist literature on heaven. Is people who are in charge because they are full of love and kindness. Unlike here, where you have government bureaucracies and bureaucrats who love to lord it over you and use the process to deny you what you think is fair. In the spirit world, is that it's entirely different. You have people who are in charge who should be in charge. As I was saying, So there's no hatred, jealousies, or selfishness. They're not present. Everyone feels a sense of fraternity and love, where the strong assist the weak, and possessions are in keeping with a person's intelligence, and no one lacks their basic needs for living. And from here, the next transition is to a purified spirit who lives on a heavenly world. And on the heavenly or divine world, there are only pure spirits. There is no evil. So that's what we're working for. Each one of us are spirits that are going through a learning process. We are trying to, over time, take away all the negative influences, all our bad characteristics, and improve them. It's like a piece of pottery in the kiln. It's the white heat of the kiln, bakes the imperfections out and makes someone perfect. And that white heat of the kiln, what takes away our imperfections, is the trials that we go through. So as we go through these trials, we learn what it's like to be on the other end of what we have done previously. And that's the important thing to remember. So we understand what we have done incorrectly before. We take that to heart and we remove that from our being. So we do have a future here. So it's not just our own future. As we try to improve as a person, but so we're also trying to improve as a planet. And that's why, as we talked about astrology and we talked about the influence of other planets, all of these things influence the Earth on a predetermined type structure, is to move the collective humanity of the Earth to a better place, right? To cause us to have, could be social upheaval, revolutions, or whatever. But even every time as you take a step back, then you'll take 2 steps forward. You'll make these changes as things become better and better. So I think that's an important point to remember. So because when you think about it, you think about how the spirit world has driven kind of the destiny of this planet. So before we think about the future, let's look at what we think happened in the past and how the stars actually may have taken a place on that one. There's a book written by the Spirit Emmanuel called On the Way to the Light. Again, is by Francisco C. Xavier, also known as Chico. And he explains the reason for the major wars of the 20th century. And this is what he said. He said, essentially, Europe was the vehicle to incubate democracy and intellectual pursuits superior to that of other nations of the world, but with the rule of action and reaction, caught up with the European nations and their violent history. And from the time of ancient Greece through the Roman Empire, and finally out of the Dark Ages, the nation of Europe advanced, military, philosophy, and scientifically more developed than the rest of the world. As the modern age appeared, Europe continued to advance its society and scientific areas. But as the 1900s approached, the continent was caught in competition to see who could build the biggest colonial empire. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870 was a precursor to the terrible devastation of World War II. And during this time, the old colonial powers saw their reach severely diminish. And this is all planned by the spirit world. So this is where you see the influence of planets on not just on individuals, but on societies as a whole. And from these events, we can determine that the spirit world has continually strived for society where all people partake in their governance. They don't want a colonial power. They don't want a dictatorship. They don't, want any of the fascism or communism. They want people to take part in their civil responsibility and try to be responsible. That is why the spirit world wants us to have a democratic or Republican form of government, and don't want to have it to be an aggressive and violent empire-building type government. So, how are they going to do this? What's their future? So what Emmanuel described is the spirit world's vision could see the demise of Europe from far away. Right? They knew what Europe was going to go through. Therefore, from the beginning of the discovery of the New World, they started to plan for the future of the Americas. And Emmanuel describes the plan to bring a fresh beginning to the new land. This is what he said. All the spirits called together to organize future progress flocked to the hemisphere of the New World. Many of them had acquired the sense of fraternity and peace after many struggles on the former continent. So, Emmanuel is telling us that they're putting people. So you have to look at the spirit world taking us, right? We're like chessmen on the board. We can be taken off the board when we die, when we pass on. We go to the spirit world and we put back on the board. Depending on our talent and our predilection for certain things, we can be put in countries in order to move those countries to where the spirit world wants them to go. So the Americas were being set up for greater good and primed to be ready for the next defining advancement. In parallel with sympathetic souls reincarnating in the Americas, a group of distinguished philosophers in Europe, such as Voltaire, Rousseau, they would lead the new American society into the future. This is all about the French Revolution, the American Revolution. At the same time, in South America, the former colonies of Spain all declared independence. So Emmanuel makes an interesting observation. He's talking about South America. He says, attentive to the mission of the Brazilian people and the civilization to come, it is worth noting the efforts of the invisible plane in maintaining Brazil's territorial integrity, while the rest of the continent was being split into smaller republics. So the spirit world has a definite plan for the Americas, right? The United States and for Brazil. So this is what he said describes the mission of the New World. On that field of new and regenerative struggles, all spirits of good could work for the advent of peace and fraternity for humanity's future. And for that reason, having in mind the forthcoming centuries, because this is how the spirit world thinks in centuries, they define the role of each region on the new continent, placing the brain of new civilization where today's United States is located in North America, and its heart in the abundant and welcoming lands of Brazil and South America. The former was to hold the material powers, the latter the first fruits of spiritual powers, destined for the planetary civilization of the future. So what are they telling us? They're telling us that Europe played their part, and now they're coming to the America, where Brazil is the heart, whereas this is their advancing Spiritism. They're revealing more with Chico Xavier and other writers, Divaldo Franco, etc., writing and psychographing information and books from spirits, giving us information more about the spirit world, more about our place in the spirit world, how we reincarnate, how we should have our own quest for our individual spirituality and also to help others. And if you notice, Brazil has never really been a colonial power. They've had very few wars of aggression. The United States, on the other hand, we've had many wars, but we had a colonial power just probably for a smaller time, with the Philippines and other other adventures, but it didn't last very long. So that is one thing to think about, is to think about where are we going. So as much as we think about how bad things are and how the world is chaos and there's war, things are getting better, but it's very slow. We can't see it in our arc, right? We can't see it in our arc of our on our very short lives. You have to look at it over hundreds and thousands of years, as the spirit world does, and they plan these things out. And they know the plan of how different planets affect us and change our attitude and our aspirations. All this is important to acknowledge that we on Earth are here and we're part of a bigger plan. Each life that we come back on the Earth, or even other planets, is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to take the collective humanity up to the next level, little by little, right? It's like a beach is made by grains of sand. Each one of us is like a grain of sand making a difference. It may not seem to us to make much difference, but we do, all of us, make a difference. So the spirit world, as they accomplished in the past, they are arranging key areas of the planet to lead the rest of the nations onto a path towards Spiritism. So Brazil will supply the religious doctrine, which we are seeing presently, and then hopefully the United States, with its massive culture, will spread Spiritism to more of the world. And we will see if this happens. So the transition has actually been occurring since mankind appeared on the planet. It's always been planned to take us through the stages from primitive to one of atonement to now to regenerative. And the flow is gradual and unstoppable. The New Testament foretold that a great division will be coming. When the way that the New Testament described it would just be, between Jesus would determine, between the left and the right, who would stay and who would go. That is also happening, but it will not be as what you think it will be. Is that we are being prepared for a transition, and then when the good spirits are the majority of the planet, we will begin that real transition to regenerate planet. And Allan Kardec, in his book Genesis, explains the implication of the final judgment. Since the good must finally reign on the earth, it will be necessary to exclude spirits who are hardened in evil and who could bring trouble to it. God has already allowed them the time needed for their improvement. But when the time comes in which, through the moral progress of its inhabitants, the earth must ascend in the hierarchy of worlds, it will be off limits as a home for incarnates and discarnates who have not taken advantage of the teaching they have been in position to receive there. They will be exiled to lower worlds as formerly those of the other people were exiled. So what will happen? Just like in like it's described in the Apocalypse, but it's going to be taken on in more of the spiritual plane. You will see that the spirits who did not accept the need to be kind and loving and open their hearts and change their attitude and characteristics will not be allowed to reincarnate on Earth. They will be divided and taken to other planets of atonement, maybe primitive planets. Other planets of atonement, probably a lower stage of in their maturity. So this is really how it's going to happen. It's not going to be like physical people being gathered. It's going to be as spirits leave their life. They've failed in their trials of atonement. They've resisted becoming good. They will not be allowed to reincarnate again on Earth, and they will be taken off into another place. So that's what's going to happen. It's going to be a weeding out of the reluctant spirits, and the population of the planet with good spirits will be gradual conversion, and we are being groomed to attain a state required for us to inhabit a non-expiatory world. And then again, what in Genesis, what they say is the apocalypse will not occur in the Big Bang, but will be, according to the Spiritists, the Earth will not be transformed by a cataclysm that will suddenly wipe out an entire generation. The current generation will disappear gradually, and a new one will follow in the same way, without there having been any change in the natural order of things. Therefore, the process is all around us. It's continual. From the first human discovering fire to the small gathering of Spiritists, it is in God's design that this conversion occurs. And again in Genesis, which is Allan Kardec's book, according to the spirit world, when something is in God's design, it must be accomplished one way or the other. Men and women contribute to its execution, but no one is indispensable. Otherwise, God would be at the mercy of God's creatures. So there's hope, right? There's hope. There's hope for each one of us. Each one of us needs to look at their own plan to improve ourselves. And think about when you're talking about looking at your own plan, is think about your life, right? So think about what has happened. I've written a book called The Problem is the Solution. And as I talked to the first caller, and she was thinking, is people question predetermination. And I totally understand that. But think about the things that happen in your life are there for a reason. They're there to teach you things. And they're there also because probably you've been part of planning for that. You've been part of that plan. So, when these little trials help you think about, okay, so why did this happen? What am I supposed to learn from this? How do I learn from this event, and why is it important? When I was in high school, I wanted to go into the Air Force. And looking back on it, that was like my whole goal, was going to the Air Force. And then in my senior year, my eyes got, right? I lost my 20/20 vision. So was that a happenstance? No, I don't think so. I think that was planned. I think it was like, okay, you're not, this is what you've done in the past. You are not allowed to go into the military in this lifetime. You tried that, didn't work out well for you. So this time, no, you're not going into the Air Force. And So these are things I see and accept. The other thing is, when I was at a medium's meeting, and there was communications from spirits, and they talked about that in my previous life, I had failed people. I had failed in my what I should do on Earth. I had failed the people I was supposed to help, and that's why I found out like every time in this life is like, let's say I worked for a company and the company was bought out and a big payment was made, right? You could make some good money. I've always managed, and I tell you, I didn't try, and I tried to hold on to it. I always managed to lose everything that was given to me. And I figured that is because in the past I was, I thought money was more important than people. I probably took advantage of people to take their money. All the things that people think about. I had most probably did. And now it's like, okay, I don't even try now. It's like I understand this is not my destiny to be too well off. So, those are things we just have to think about when we go through these trials of what's happening, and to recognize that we go through these things is not as a punishment, but as a teacher. The spirit world is there. Our guardian angels are supporting mentors are helping us learn the valuable lessons, right? Because it's everything we go through, every trial we go through is done with love, right? It's done with love, and it's done to help us. That is the most important thing to remember. This is, what we think is pain and these horrible consequences, and that, and especially me, like I, whine and complain through things when things were bad, and I'm finally learning is, that is not the right behavior. That is just it shouldn't say you should be passive, right? You should still work through everything you need to work through, and be focused and have your energy. But at the same time, always try to be nice. Don't dwell in your misery, but work out of it, right? Because that's why you have this happening. It's for you to figure out of how to solve your trial. And what the spirit world is telling us every time is that no trials are made that there isn't some way to be triumphant, right? There's not some way out of that trial. Now, and that's the other thing. There's a great book called Memoirs of Suicide, and Camino Branco committed suicide, went to this hospital where the spirits talked to other spirits who committed suicide, and they told each one of them, said, look, you killed yourself. You're really not allowed to stop your trial early. You should never commit suicide. And we also want to tell you that everything you thought was so horrible at the time, there was help. Something was going to change and help you out of that. It was going to be just around the corner. It could be weeks, months. It could have been a year. But each of your trials would have finished and would have had an ending of some sort. So our life is like going back in high school or whatever. You go from class to class. Here we go from trial to trial. Some major event, we live through that event. Things get better, right? Maybe another event could be a good event. So that is what our life's about, but we are always helped and guided by the spirit world around us. So don't ever think that that's not going to happen. So make sure in your own mind that there's always help. That's why it's a good idea to sit and meditate and pray for a while. And just ask for guidance, ask to help through your trial, ask help for other people. Because the more you help other people, the more you will be helped. That's again that we're told that, over and over in the spiritualist literature is the more you help others, the more the spirit world will help you. It truly is a way that they want to reward good behavior. And I'm not saying you have to be a saint. You don't have to give all your money away or anything like that. I certainly don't. But try to be honest and kind and loving to people, and just as you can, change your behavior, change your thoughts. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up this. I just want to make sure everybody I enjoyed all the people asking questions today, and thank you. And remember that we have a show every Sunday, 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern, to give you 2 points of reference. And I will come up with a subject first, talk about 10, 15 minutes or so, and then open it up. Your questions don't have to be on the topic itself. Last week we went way off topic, and they're always interesting, and we're always here and ready to help you. So I will start ending the program now, and thank you so much for your participation. I would like to thank everyone for listening to our program on Kardec Radio, and to point you in the direction to find more information about the spirit world around us. You can visit my blog at www.nwspiritism.com. Again, that is www.nw, as in Northwest, spiritism.com. And if you are ever in the Northwest, I certainly would welcome to have you come to our meeting on Bainbridge Island near Seattle in the state of Washington. Many blessings to all of you, and please continue to explore Spiritism and the spirit world around us.